Hurrah and welcome to the PCU. This is a Loki review. This is episode 4 of the Loki show on Disney Plus. This is the Nexus Event, the episode name. I'll be one of your hosts for this show. My name is Bogz. Meet my fellow co-host Sean. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm really interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this episode. We're more than halfway through Loki season 1, so curious to hear what you guys' thoughts on it.
And my girl Soul. How you doing?
Good. I'm back home. As you can see, I'm back in my normal setup. So had a good holiday, but glad to be home.
Back to reality. Not like Loki, actually. So yeah, we'll see. So
I literally did the Eminem rap in my head immediately after that. So thank you for that, Bogz.
Yes, there you go. Okay, so quick summary of this episode. I'll just quickly give mine first, and I'd love to hear your guys. So I thought it was, well, to be honest, I thought the most exciting thing was the end credit scene, or the mid-credit scene, whatever you want to call it, where the possibilities of what's going to happen. I thought that was the most interesting thing to happen in the episode. There was a few interesting moments and scenes overall, but for me, this series has become a bit stagnant, and as just the overall story arc didn't move forward enough. There were a few like character story tie-ins to kind of tie into the main storyline, but for me, it was really weird episode. So, like I said, some nice moments, but a lot of confusing things that I'm happy to discuss with you guys. But I know a lot of people really love this episode. But what about you, Sol? What are your quick overall thoughts on the episode?
Opposite of you, I did think the story moved forward a lot in this episode. I liked it a lot. I liked the stuff with B-15. I liked stuff with Loki and Mobius there, and kind of people learning more about the TVA along as with us learning about the TVA. I got some theories that I'll talk about later in this episode, but it was a very interesting episode for me. I liked it a lot.
Cool. And Sean, what are you thinking?
I liked it. I agree with you a little bit, Boggs, that there's not as much story going forward as I would have liked, but I still enjoyed what we got that moved the story a little bit further. But just my overall thoughts is just that the episode doesn't justify the length. It's like over 40 minutes long, yep. But we only really got a lot of repetitive scenes.
Definitely.
But at the same time, the stuff that we learned was really, really important, and it just does a great. This more or less to me is like I wouldn't use the word filler. I would use more as this is a bridge episode to kind of connect what we've seen before to the next two. Like whatever happens in the next two episodes, you can't fully get without watching this one. So it's a really important episode. It's not the best episode, but it's a really important episode.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's fair, definitely. And can you also put your phone on silent, Sean? It's very unprofessional. But anyway, it's
it's actually my computer doing that. But
it really sounds. That's a weird noise. But anyway, for a computer to me. So yeah, we're gonna go through the episode. So loosely, scene by scene stuff. So I'm not gonna go exactly because there was a lot of things happening. So I'm gonna kind of loosely go through it. So overall, beginning starts with the TVA. Basically, on full display as they kidnap a young Sylvie from Asgard. Then I felt like the TVA looked like a bit like the SS, like Nazis, with kind of dark helmets and the way that the gear is and things like that. And then we see the kind of flashback I thought it was from Ravana's point of view, or her eyes, or her perspective, because we get a glimpse of her taking Sylvie and then kind of going through the TVA and then seeing the Timekeepers. We get kind of a quick glimpse, really well shot. Them looking kind of royal, like sitting up, kind of looking down on everyone. And we see it from kind of her eyes. So we knew that they're going to have some kind of involvement in this episode. Finally, we're kind of going to see what the Timekeepers are about. So thoughts on the opening, Sol, just seeing, like I said, the Timekeepers and what happened with kind of flashback scenes. So do you have any thoughts on the opening at all?
Yeah, I like the juxtaposition with the first episode and this episode, because when we were watching Loki go through the TVA in the very first episode, we're laughing at every moment, like sign that this is everything you've ever said ever, and like we're having fun moments with that. And then when you're seeing it done with a child from a very scary perspective, and like I in my notes I wrote like, this seems very dictatorship like with the TVA, that I was like, oh, you actually see how scary the TVA is here. And that kind of like puts it in a different perspective of like, I've had thoughts of the TVA being evil, but this episode really showed like, yeah, they're evil. The other thing too is seeing the shadows of the Timekeepers. I was just like, for whatever reason, I was like, I don't think those are the actual Timekeepers when I saw that part. And maybe it's just me like guessing what's happening next. But I was just like, something's gonna happen here where those aren't the actual Timekeepers, and we see that later on in the episode.
Yeah, it did seem a little simple because you're hearing about the timekeepers and they're just sitting there, and you thought, oh, is that it? Is that? And then obviously they're gonna come. They'll be more involved later in the episode, of course. But Sean, what are your thoughts on the overall opening of the episode of Sylvie getting abducted on Asgard and then seeing the timekeepers from Ravana's perspective, and obviously her going through the whole TVA process of same process that Loki did, obviously from a child's kind of point of view and perspective.
I agree with so. The second I saw the time code, I was like, "Yep, that's not real." I don't know why I thought that. Maybe because we saw them in a non like typical reveal way. I was just like, "Yeah, that's gonna end up not being real," and it wasn't. So also, it's just seeing Sylvie like being abducted, and then later on finding out like, "Oh, why'd you do that?" No, I don't remember. It was just like I want to know. I want to learn more about that. I want to learn more about her, because obviously there has been something. Was she the real reason why like it got pruned? I don't know. So was it something that someone else did and they just was like, we're just. Is it something about Loki's specifically? Because we've seen later on in the episode a lot of Loki's have been pruned before. So that scene just gets me more intrigued about her specifically. Like, I want to learn more about her, but at the same time, just seeing the TVA, the Timekeepers, I just had this strong feelings like something's not right about this, and then we come to find out later why.
Yeah, and then we cut to Lamentis 1, where there's kind of meteor shards and like a shower almost happening, crashing down on the planet. They're about to meet the planet's about to meet its end, where we get the two Loki variants almost accepting their fate in terms of what's going to happen. Is this their kind of end, kind of holding hands and being having intimate moments. And already I kind of thought, okay, it is a bit weird that two Loki variants are kind of attracting to each other, so obviously that had more involvement throughout the episode. But and then pretty much the kind of at the last minute the characters are plucked out and returned and captured by the TVA, and they kind of being marched through, and then there's a few funny lines from Loki and stuff. But overall I thought this was a bit of a repetitive thing, like Loki again being marched through the TVA, like he's been arrested and captured before, and being put down at a desk with Mobius. I was like, we've seen this again. So it was, for me, it was a bit of a repetitive thing. And then basically Mobius basically at this point trying to extract information. Well, we cut to the scene where he's having a drink with Ravana, where he's trying to extract information from. Obviously, at this point, Roki's told him that you're all variants, and kind of left that information with him. He's trying to extract information from Ravana. That was fun. Obviously, seeing kind of Owen Wilson kind of having a drink and being playful with it, and then throwing in the odd question to be inquisitive, trying to find out if he is a variant, or why didn't you put me in with Sylvie and things like that. Just little smart kind of ways, and I thought it was fun. And then the kind of same information is given to Hunter B-15. We see her ask Sylvie to come with her to kind of she was going to try and quiz Sylvie a little bit more about being a part of this, what is true, what isn't true, because she had obviously some feelings about being kind of under the enchantment and stuff. And then for me, again, this is something I didn't really like, because we, the audience, are way ahead of Mobius and Hunter B-15. because we already know their variants. We already know, what's going on. So it's like they are catching up with us. So for me, it was a bit of an eye roll few scenes, because it's like, okay, we already know this. We're miles ahead of you guys. We're just seeing what we already know. So for me, again, I felt like the same kind of cycles. I feel like a hamster going in a, I forgot what they're called. When hamsters like going in them little things that they do, their exercise things. I just feel like, yeah. I feel like one of them, just watching the same kind of different variations or versions of the same story. So I don't know. It's a very weird story arc. But Sean, I know you had some thoughts about the characters plucked out from Lamentis 1, and then the kind of what happened with the TVA, and then and then maybe it's having interactions with Ravana, and any thoughts about them scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like the how they escaped that, because I mean, in our last review, I was pretty much like, I don't want them just to be plucked off at the last second. And not only did that happen, the reason that it happened is because they were creating a branch. I'm like, well, wait a second, you're going against your own logic here. The reason they're in a Nexus event is because whatever happens there would not create a branch, because everybody from there is going to die. So if they started having feelings for each other, which into itself is a little weird, but whatever, I can accept it, because they're not related. They're the same, but they're not related, so whatever. Them having feelings should not create a branch, and that quickly. So I don't understand that, and the show doesn't really explain it that well either. So that was just kind of whatever. But other than that, like Loki talking to Morbius about like being a variant, he took it as well as he took it the way I would expect. It's like, man, get out of here. You're just lying. You're just saying whatever you need to say to survive. So I get that he would take it that way, but I do like the fact that he just didn't dismiss it completely. He's like, there might be some truth to this, so let me kind of investigate a little bit. And he starts prodding a little bit, and he got to see like, well, she's not telling me, or Ravana's not telling me everything. So there might be some prudence to what he's saying, especially about the other Minutemen who C20? Is that her name?
Hunter B-15.
No, not B-15.
C20, yeah.
C20, yeah. Because especially like when he was just like, well, but she was fine. Like, she's dead now. Like, well, yeah. What do you mean? So like, you could just see there's cracks in the story there, and he just like it just gave him more reason to kind of investigate things. So you're right. Just having him and Morbius sit down yet again, and then him not believing him, and Loki like, no, I'm telling the truth. It's like, yes, we've seen it before, but it's a little bit different. So I hear what you're saying, Bogz, but there's a little.
Them scenes aren't short either. They're like 10 minutes.
No, they're not. But there's a little bit of a spice to them, extra element that makes it a little fresher. But I get it why you would feel like, oh, we've seen this already. But for me, it worked. But so to this point, I was like, I'm okay. I'm feeling it. I'm good.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to know your thoughts as well. But so just to clarify as well, I would like your comment on what I'm saying. So I feel like this episode focuses on plot information we already know as audiences, and it feels like the characters are discovering things after us. So for me, there's a lack of emotion there for me to be emotionally invested, because we already know. Like, so the characters are just going through the motions, and I'm like, okay. Can we get to where they already know what's going on, and then we'll kind of move on? So thoughts on that, and obviously what we've seen as well, where obviously Loki sitting down with Mobius, and then him and Ravana, and all them scenes, and overall thoughts on that.
Yeah, the funny part to me really was Loki. I was like, Loki wants to get with himself. Like at that moment, he was given those loving eyes, and I was like, that is such a narcissistic thing to. And I think we have Mobius say that later, like, what a narcissist! You're falling in love with yourself. So that part was funny for me, and I had a good laugh at that. And then I do remember Sean and I both saying that on the last episode, where like, we know they're gonna survive because they're the main characters, although there was something at the end of the episode that I was like, oh, they actually did. Oh, wait, no. And then you had the end credit scene. That would have been really interesting if he would have actually died at the very end. But so I was like, okay, that's convenient that they're being plucked off. And I think you have a very valid criticism there, Bogz, of like, they're learning stuff that we already know. And so it needs to be presented in an interesting way. And I think some of the stuff was presented in an interesting way, and then other stuff, like, I have some criticism for, like, the fact when later on when B-15 like learns she's a variant, like, we don't get shown that scene. It's basically all dialogue there, and you see her reaction, but like you're not shown her memories. And so I think there's moments in this episode where they show the information in an interesting enough way for me that I'm like, okay, like, I already know this, but it's interesting to watch them learn it. And then there's other moments where I was like, okay, come on, let's get on with it.
Yeah, and I'll stick with that, where Hunter B-15 asked Sylvie to show her memories that she kind of felt previously obviously in one of the previous episodes, by the kind of enchantment power that she has. But again, we don't get to see it. Yeah, that is super frustrating, as you said. Like, she's having an emotional moment, but we're not seeing it. We're not feeling it as the audience moment. I feel like that's just repeated throughout the episode, where the overall story doesn't move forward because the individual plot points, whether it's Hunter B-15, whether it's Mobius, whether it's Loki, whether it's Sylvie, their plot points are moving forward, but it doesn't include the emotional impact because we're already aware of all these plot points. So very confusing episode for me. And for example, Loki going over the same scene with Sif, for me, it doesn't add anything to the story. Like, okay, we already know these things about Loki. He's admitting, his self-criticisms, and he's selfish. We talked about this two or three episodes ago. So kind of for me, again, non-emotional, non-impact stuff. But obviously you already commented on the Hunter B-15 stuff there. Anything else to add? You want to add on that, or the Loki going over the same kind of scene with Sif or anything?
I liked seeing Sif. I was just like, oh, look, there we go.
Yeah, it was a nice surprise. Definitely.
It was a nice surprise. And then it was, we are getting those Lokiisms of him, just like, we know why he is the way he is because we've watched the MCU for this whole time. And so it did get a little repetitive there. And then obviously repetitive because the same scene was playing over and over again. So it was moments of like, okay, like maybe one or two times of the repeated scene would have been like fun to see because like he just edited it, and then him getting it kind of like seemed like it was physical humor, and like a nut shot is only funny like the first few times, but when you're watching him get a nut shot multiple times, you're just like, okay, it stops being funny. It's like when you take a joke and like you take it to so far that it's no longer funny, and it didn't take it back to where it goes farther to where it becomes funny again. To me, it just didn't become funny again at the end.
Yeah, talking about no longer funny, Sean, please go ahead with your
oh wow, please, okay,
your about your thoughts on some of these scenes with the Hunter scene, with the enactment stuff, and then obviously Loki with being with Safi as well, with Sif, sorry.
I agree with you too about B-15. We should have seen it. We definitely, like, it's always there's an old saying, don't tell me, show me. Because especially for her to kind of betray the TVA in the way she did, and us not see the main reason why she did it, is kind of, I wouldn't say a cop-out, but it's just like a missed opportunity. It's the same thing with Morbius. Like, for him to go against the TVA, he should, especially if he doesn't come back, which I'm pretty sure he will, but let's just say for right now he's gone. If he's gone and we didn't, he should have been shown something too. We should have seen him on a jet ski. Maybe that's exactly the reason he likes jet ski, because he maybe owned a jet ski shop before. So there's got to be a tie there. So seeing the memories that would have convinced them that they're variants, to me, would have been very, very important to see. The Sith thing, however, I love seeing Sith because she was a great character, and now that her TV show is over, she's obviously was in this, which is surprising. She's also going to be in Thor: Love and Thunder, so I'm looking forward to seeing her in that too. I didn't take it as more of a comedic thing. Like, yes, we're supposed to laugh at it, but Loki's supposed to learn something from it. There was a reason he was put in there. It's because no matter what he did and what he told her, the end result was still going to be the same until the end, where she just said, you know what, you're just going to end up being alone anyway. Like he's supposed to learn from that. Like, regardless of what he did or said to her, she was still going to kick his ass to the point where she just had pity on him. Like, you're just going to be alone forever. So I won't kick your ass this time because you're just going to be alone. So for me, it was just him going through his own little personal torture for him to learn a lesson. And yes, for him to get kneed in the groin was also part of it, but it's also for him to learn a lesson, a physical one and an emotional and mental one at the same time. So I like that, but I agree with you guys. Like with Morbius and with B15, we have to have seen it for it to matter. And the thing, Bogz, about like learning stuff different, the characters are behind us, that happens all the time. So I don't have a problem with the show doing that, because there's a lot of times when we learn things right at the beginning, and then it takes a while for the characters to catch up to us. But Soul is right. Sometimes if that's the case, you have to do it in more interesting ways where the characters will catch up to us. And I think them showing the scenes the same way we saw C20s, we should have saw B15, and we should have saw Mobius's. So that's it. You know.
Yeah, and then Mobius pulls him out because he's kind of established that he's a variant, and he kind of comes back to the TVA, and almost immediately he's pruned. So we see him being pruned, and for me, that again, almost a not reaction. I was a bit confused first, but obviously I did realize, you know, he is one of the leads of the series. I couldn't imagine him just finishing there. Also, there wasn't an emotional impact to it. As you said, you know, you mentioned the jet skis in his former life. We don't get to see anything like that. So I just feel like their deaths, I feel like it's not the end of their characters, like when they die. And I'll come to that into my summary as well. Like the TVA is like, they've kind of changed their mind with the TVA, or like, no, not changed their mind. Like it's almost like a fake out with the TVA. So even when someone dies or when they're pruned, they're not really dead, or they're not really, you know, pruned. It's just like, okay, like something else is going to happen where they're going to come back. So it's, for me, that's why there was no emotional impact when he was pruned. And then, yeah. So any thoughts on that sort? Obviously, seeing Mobius, you know, some people might be really shocked or surprised, or not for me. I thought it was not that impactful, not that emotional, to be honest. Unfortunately.
So for me, it was emotional in the moment until I saw the end credit scene, because it was just like, oh, they really went there. They killed him. And then if you kill Owen Wilson, then you're evil. So like the TVA, they're evil, right?
Yeah.
But I was very much like, this was very on brand for the TVA, because we saw them immediately. Like anytime someone stepped out of line, they were being pruned. And I was like, they're literally murdering people. But then you're seeing the end credit scene. So is there like a place that all pruned people go? Or is that only Loki's survive because they somehow are Loki's able to survive death so much because he's done it? And like, I forget what he said. He's like, I've died so much that like, you have no threat to me. Go ahead, try to kill me, kind of thing. And when he was talking to the Timekeepers, and so it was very much of like, okay, is he coming back or is he actually dead thing with that end credit scene? But in that moment, I was just like, oh, this is the show we're having. And then later on, when like Loki got pruned, that got me too. And I was like, maybe the Loki of the title is actually Sylvie and not Loki. And I was getting excited. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then we had the end credit scene. I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's yeah. I kind of wish I felt like that watching this. But Sean, I know you just commented on him getting pruned, but anything else you want to add to that scene?
No, I didn't. I wasn't worried about him whatsoever when he got pruned, only because the TVA has lied to us before. So we only know that getting pruned means you dying because they said that. So they've lied before. So the second he died or pruned in that kind of fashion made me think, oh, nah, he's gonna be fine. That's not the last we're gonna see of him. The same thing when we see Loki get pruned, I was like, well, the same way I felt about Owen Wilson getting pruned, I feel about Loki. Like, that's not the last we're gonna see of him. So I wasn't in like, oh my god. Even though I'm sure some people were like, no.
I've watched Game of Thrones where main characters get killed off. So I was just like, oh, this is really interesting if they're killing off a main character. I was actually hoping for it. I was like, this makes the show even better.
Yeah, but there's killing main characters, but giving them a meaningful death. Owen Wilson just getting pruned like that, it was just like, done, and he was done.
It's against a person that he obviously has a crush on, or with Ravonna, and they have that relationship there. So I thought, to me, Could the death scene been better and more build up? Yes, but it worked for me in the moment.
Well, no, for what it is, but if that was to be his last moment, it wouldn't work. But I know it's not, so I'm not. That's why it doesn't. It didn't. I didn't feel anything. Same thing when Loki got pruned. Like I didn't feel anything about it because of like I know he's not dead, because pruning just only they lied before, they could be lying about this. Now what happens to them specifically, that's more interesting of what we're going to learn in episode 5. Because is it, or if you get pruned, you just get sent to another dimension, or what is it, or so is there like a whole bunch of Lokis? Is there a whole bunch of Owen Wilsons? Who the hell knows? But that's more or less what we're gonna find in episode 5. But it didn't affect me whatsoever, because I was like, once I saw, I was like, that's not real. Like that's just him getting put somewhere else at this point. So
I guess I'm gullible.
No, you're not gullible, because
you're the intended.
You react the way you're supposed to react. That's supposed to be like, oh, no, it's gone. But I'm like, oh no, wait, that's probably just a fake out.
Yeah, basically. And then kind of the episode ends with, or culminates in a fight scene with, or in front of the Timekeepers. You know, they come to get like into an elevator. They come out and they have a fight with the other kind of TVA agents. When we also see the Timekeepers, speak and how they look. I didn't think when I first saw them at the beginning of the episode, in the first scene, I thought they looked okay. I actually think they look really bad. Like they just look weird, and I think they sounded weird. I couldn't actually hear some of what they were saying. The two lower ones, like they was really muffled. It was really, really weird. Like I know they had like animatronics, or it was like a CG, wherever they were like alien species, but I rewound it and I still couldn't understand what they were saying. I think the middle one looked okay.
Subtitles,
but the other two were just like
help.
I need
it
to
really does help.
on, but I just thought they did not look good. Like they didn't look convincing or sadistic, or like not sadistic, but like intimidating enough or evil enough. I just thought something was off. Something was really strange about them. And obviously then they kind of have the fight, and it is revealed that they are, animatronics, that they are robots. And then for me, that kind of ruins the climax and the tension of that scene. I thought it was in a weird space. Like the head's there, they've just stayed at the bottom of the stairs. I thought, what is going on here? And then obviously Loki's then pruned by Ravonna. And then we see, as we mentioned, the post-credit scene where he's in some other place where other Loki variants are there. So again, that's the most interesting thing. I was like, oh, okay, like what's going on here? Like, how would these happen? They look great as well. Obviously, Richard E. Grant was one of them. So fantastic actor, obviously. So he's super interesting. That's promising going into the next episode. But we'll go with Sean. So what are your thoughts of seeing the Timekeepers, the fight scene, and then tell me your thoughts on the post scene as well.
I agree with you. I think the Timekeepers look weird because they were supposed to look weird because they're not real. Like they looked and sounded weird because they don't necessarily have to look and sound great, because if you're going to see them, you ain't coming back. So the idea of like Loki and Sylvia going in it, like they weren't meant to come back, and everybody else in the TV has drank the Kool-Aid. So it doesn't matter to them what they look like and sound like, because they are all believing. So, but for us as the audience, I don't know how you can watch that and be like, yeah, that looks and sounds about right to me. It's like, no, that's definitely not real at all. And it ended up like, once I saw the head come, I was like, yep, I was right. But it gave me a lot of Last Jedi vibes of like when Rey and what's his name were fighting in front of Snoke. Kylo Ren. It just gave me vibes of that, them fighting from I don't know, it just reminded me of that for some strange reason. That was the first thing that came to my head. And again, Loki getting pruned was just like, yeah, whatever. I'm curious, and seeing the end credit scene, I thought was just like, that's a great place to leave it off.
Yeah.
Because then again, I think, like I said earlier, this is a bridge episode. So if you just start watching episode 5 without watching episode 4, you're like, wait, what the hell is going on? So some might call it a filler episode. I wouldn't necessarily go that far, because there is important stuff that we learned in this episode. So I wouldn't go that far, but I'm really, really curious about who's really behind the TVA now, and B, what does pruning actually mean now? Because now we've seen what those, like, is that what happens to everybody who's got pruned? Like, do they go to like a separate dimension, or hell, or what have you? So like, there's a lot of things that this episode has questions have brought up that I'm I'm a little worried that it might push a lot of these questions on to episode 6, and then we get that same thing like we talked about before, where that episode has a lot of work to do. So I'm hoping a lot of answers get answered in episode 5, so we don't have to necessarily worry about them in 6. But the ending for me was great. Is the best part of the episode. I agree with you.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of questions going into the next episode, but yeah, really interesting post-credit scene. That was my favorite kind of scene in the episode because that immediately moved the story forward. Okay, this is what's happening when they get pruned. So, yeah. So, your thoughts on the Timekeepers, the fight scene towards the end there, and obviously the post-credit scene with the other variants as well.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw the Timekeeper, I was like, they look really weird. They sound really weird. I'm glad I'm watching this with subtitles because I was reading what they were saying more than listening to what. Sorry, I had someone come in for a second.
Tech issues.
Tech issues. Sorry, but I immediately, when you have, and I'm still calling her Lady Loki, when you had Lady Loki fighting Ravonna. And then kind of like at the end, and we're like, we didn't see her prune Ravonna or kill Ravonna. I was just like, while your guys are just talking there, go over there and prune her real quick. Because if you don't, she's going to come back. And it's the main trope that you see in like all action movies, all stuff. And I was just like, so it made sense. I was like, yep, she got Loki. But then I was the intended audience of like, oh, maybe the show's about Lady Loki. And like until the end credit scene, which was very interesting because we saw Kid Loki there and we saw some other variants of Loki in the post-credit scene. And so like my theory is that all the different Lokis who have all been pruned, we saw, I think it was episode 2 where they were going through all the Lokis that they pruned before, that they're all going to come together to fight against the TVA, and that's going to be really interesting. And then I really want to know if Ravonna knew they were animatronics, or if she like thought that they were really real. Because if she like was talking to these the way they looked, I would have been like, this is weird. They can't be real, kind of thing on my perspective. But I do have some theories with her that I guess we'll go in when we go into our theories.
Yeah, exactly. So just give a quick summary of the episode and, like I said, theories as well. So my summary is that the last 2 episodes are 100% filler, as you said, Sean. So for me anyway. So this episode less so than the other one. But for me, this episode was basically they were saved off Lamentis. They he was pruned. And then at the end we see, oh, okay, what does pruned mean? You know, is this another dimension? Is this another place? Whatever. They were the 3 interesting plot points. The whole thing in the middle were they were kind of just almost felt like just plot points for other characters, just to tie up their story. Stuff that I'm not wasn't too engaged with. So, and as well, like the larger plot points of the story being the TVA, they felt like almost like a superpower, like an empire. Now they just feels like everyone's just there brainwashed, working like they're just like zombies. So immediately for me, they're just less interesting now. And yeah, it feels like the TVA was just a surface level, and their story has like abandoned the core ideas of, you know, the TVA being like an ultimate power in the universe, and death and pruning and multiverse. It all just seems like, oh, they're all just gone now. So like there's some other kind of work going on, and the show after this episode for me is actually a little bit less interesting, unfortunately. So like I said, definitely looking forward to the next episode though, based on that post-credit scene. But for me, I did not enjoy this too much. Again, it wasn't bad. Just I was expecting a lot more. I'd honestly give this like a 5 out of 10. I thought I was very disappointed with this episode. I know people love it, and you know, you guys are going to give a higher markings and ratings and stuff. But yeah, please, Sal, give me your overall summary of the episode and any of these theories that you're referring to as well.
I think there was good things in this episode, and I kind of agree with Sean that it was a bridge episode. That when you watch this like back to back instead of in a week to week format, it's going to be like, oh, this is the episode we got all the information in, kind of thing, and where everyone caught up to where we as the audience are. So in a sense, there was interesting stuff. There was stuff that like I have a few qualms with, especially like not seeing B-15s. Um, or even like not even like you said Mobius. I didn't even think about possibly seeing Mobius like his memories either. That would have been really cool to see. So for me, I guess like it puts it like at a 7 out of 10 for me. It's not the best. I don't have it as low as Bogz. And then my theory, I like Ravonna in the comics, she's worked with Kane the Conqueror. They were an item, and so I think we're gonna see him in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I think he might be the actual true leader of the TVA, and she's working for him, kind of thing. The TVA, I will agree with Bogz, did become a little less interesting because they went from being such like a high power to now kind of just being like mindless drones. So I hope that the TVA becomes interesting again in the next 2 episodes.
Yeah, I'm almost disappointed in myself. Like maybe I put this on too much. Expectations were too high. I was too much anticipation going in. But if I'm being honest, I am a little underwhelmed with this series so far. But Sean, what are your overall thoughts on it? And did you need more by any chance, or is that just
no? I didn't need more. So again, this episode was a bridge. The episode before, I think, could only be described as filler if Sylvie dies at the end of the series, which I don't think will happen. I actually disagree with you two. I think the TVA is actually more interesting because it is still like a high power. Like the fact that those Infinity Stones mean nothing there still holds a lot of weight. So the only thing that's really come in question is who's really running things and how does it really work. The TVA as itself, the core mission their mission statement may be in flux because we don't really know what they're actually really doing. But the fact that like those Infinity Stones not working there and like magic not working there, things of that nature, that to me is still very interesting. What becomes more interesting now is that we know for sure that whoever's really running things is just feeding people bullshit. But to what end? So is it Kang? Is it Ramona working with Kang? Is it Ramona knows something? She ain't no fool. So that's why Sylvia's like, you better tell me everything you know. She knows something. What she knows, who she knows, that's the most interesting thing because that will make us look at the TVA a little bit differently because I don't think the TVA is going anywhere. I think this is an element that's here to stay, obviously in Loki Season 2, and it's going to have an effect on the MCU in some way, shape, or form going forward. So for me, I find the TVA a lot more interesting, but that's just me. Theories, I really don't have any at this point because the show could literally do whatever the hell it wants. Would bringing Kang be interesting? It would be an interesting twist, but I don't know if that's something that I would want. I would hope that they can.
Maybe he's a villain who runs through time, so it would make.
Well, sense. But I'm just hoping like that. Is it weird to say that be just too easy to just like, oh, Kang's a time traveler, I just put him in charge of it. I would kind of maybe want something different from that. But if they were to do that, it would make sense. But I would just love to see that the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, could be bigger than just putting everything on Kang. Because obviously Kang's going to have other things that he's probably going to be doing. So that's just that. But for me, I think this episode did a great job of setting everything else up. And I think Bogz would agree to that. But I would give it a 7.5. I would give it higher if what you said was true. If we would have saw B-15, because obviously she's not dead. We saw what her vision was. And as long as Mobius comes back, which I would assume he does, if that was the last time we saw him, that would have been a disservice to not seeing it from him. But I think we'll see him again, so it's fine. But yes, it was a little bit repetitive. So I can understand your criticisms at that point. But for me, I felt like there was enough new information that we got to make the episode enjoyable.
Yeah, glad you guys enjoyed it. Obviously we've got a mixed bag of opinions here, but no, overall, everyone watching? What are your kind of thoughts on the episode? Please like, comment, subscribe. Drop us a comment on your overall thoughts, where the story going, any theories that you have, and your thoughts overall of the series. But yeah, please check out our other reviews and videos on the Bad Batch. Currently, we've got more trailer reactions dropping this week as well. So yeah, please follow us along on the journey, and yeah, looking forward to the next episode, most definitely. So I've been Bogz, that's been Soul, that's been Sean, and we are signing off on this episode of the Loki series.